Welcome to 8 with 8, a podcast from Ohio State Support Team 8, where we share what's on our minds and what's in the research from the field of education. As we reset for the new school year and continue our pandemic recovery journey, school climate and supports are definitely on our mind. ODE offers 8 considerations for reset and restart in special education, and one of them reads, how will staff support the establishment of an inclusive community to support the needs of students who receive special education services? Well, Stephanie Denham and Stacy Smith are here today to give you 8 ideas on that topic. You'll hear some strategies and some fun games to promote a positive and inclusive school climate, one in which all staff believe that in order to meet the needs of all students, it's necessary to meet the needs of each student.
I'm Stephanie, and I'm here with Stacy to talk about school climate. Stacy, I've been thinking about all the teachers out there setting up for the start of a new school year, planning the bulletin boards, moving desks around on those newly waxed floors, and planning how to welcome back their students. They will be welcoming kids back for the start of a fresh year after some really challenging months. This made me think of a new book I have been reading. It's called Your Students, My Students, Our Students, Rethinking Equitable and Inclusive Classrooms. Have you heard of that one yet?
I have heard of that one, and I love the title. Can you tell me more about it, Steph?
Of course. So listen to this opening line. It's from the chapter on establishing a culture of equity and inclusion. It says, we start with the culture of inclusion because it's foundational to the creation of schools that work for all students. The philosophy of staff within a school directly and significantly affects the system of supports that are available for students. This concept of starting with culture, it's powerful, right?
Definitely, especially after the year we've all experienced. It's really highlighted the importance of relationships and the power of feeling included.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds great, but how do we do it? Well, I went to another favorite one of my books for some ideas. So today, let's bring 8 strategies to the audience for building a community in inclusive classrooms. Most of these are taken from the book 30 Days in the Co-Taught Classroom by Julie Costin and Paula Kluth. So to start, I'm going to share 4 of my favorite, and Stacy, get ready because I'm going to ask you which one you like best.
All right, I'm ready.
So the first one is called Clear Expression of Values. And this strategy calls for teachers and students to work together to set some guidelines for the classroom. It reminds me of the work that a lot of our buildings and districts are doing to set clear expectations for PBIS. So listen to some of the examples. These are from a middle school classroom that they highlighted in their book. The first one is, we are all learners and we are all teachers. Another one is, we will create opportunities in this classroom to share expertise with each other. Difference is normal and expected. And the last one they listed was, we will not all work at the same rate, have the same preferences, work best with the same classmates, or need the same things to succeed. I think this is such a powerful activity for classrooms to work on together at the start of the new year. And when thinking of students with disabilities, this also presents an opportunity to be sure that all kids in your classroom really understand what the expectations look like. What do they look like? What do they sound like? And when I think about that clear expression of values, it reminds me of the second strategy, and that one is class meetings. So class meetings can be used all year round to build community and positive climate in the classroom. You can use a class meeting to vote on issues, solve problems, discuss concerns, or plan special events. These really are an opportunity to teach students to become an active member in their community, just not outside, also inside the classroom. You can use it at any age level. I know preschool and early learning classrooms usually call it circle time. If you're reading Hacking School Discipline, which I know many out there are, this is really related to the circle up strategy. And so class meetings are a really nice one to build community at the beginning of the year. During those class meetings, you can do the third strategy called appreciations. And appreciations is an example that the one they used in the book is an elementary classroom. And they had a student sit in what they called the sweet spot. And it's literally just a chair positioned magically in the front of the classroom. And the students sitting here spent a couple of minutes receiving thanks and receiving compliments from their classmates. For students with disabilities, this is a really good opportunity to work on verbal communication skills. You can make it into a game by asking them to have students give a little orange juice or a water toast to each other to make it fun. And to adapt it to high school students, they can have a compliment-centered Twitter challenge. And the fourth strategy is humor. Now, teachers don't need a background in improv comedy to lighten the mood. You can use humor. You can put in entertaining video clips or silly visuals or cartoons to bring some levity into daily work. I really think this is great for students with disabilities that like to tell jokes or need some help with their communication skills. And it's really great for kids that just want to talk a lot. So you can get ahead of the behavior and give them some time. So the four that I went over are clear expression of values, class meetings, appreciations, and humor. Which one did you like, Stacy?
That's a tough one, Steph. I liked them all. But I think the one that stood out to me the most was humor. And it made me think of one of our favorite authors, Marcia Tate, because do you remember she talked about strategies that engage the brain, and humor was one of those. And she talked about that with humor and laughter, it actually lowers a child's stress level and helps them to be more alert and retain content. So if you've got some humor in your classroom, not only will it build community, it'll engage the brain. So those were great, Stephanie. Thanks for sharing. But now it's my turn. I'm going to share 4, Stephanie, so get ready. I'm going to ask you the same. Which one do you like? So the first one I have is read aloud. And when I say read aloud, I think a lot of people think of young students who aren't proficient readers yet. But I'm going to challenge you to think it's a great technique for any age, because when you read aloud, you can share content that maybe is above a child's ability to read. And also it just gives that commonality of what are you reading. So you really can think about what would you choose to read? Could you focus on maybe some books that have some diversity or differences, maybe things about social change or friendship? And then really that could promote the class discussion around those. So again, just thinking about reading aloud regardless of the age, and also maybe taking away that barrier that maybe some students have with their ability to read. So that's the first one I wanted to share. The second one I want to share is a strategy called back to back. And this is literally having kids sit back to back, and instead of focusing on differences, really starting to think about what do we have in common. So you'd have your students sit back to back, and they would just start to share something about themselves and see if they can come up with some things that they have in common. So Stephanie, if we were going to do this and we sat back to back, I may say something like, I'm one of 3 girls in my family. And you would say, oh, I'm not one of 3 girls, but I have 1 sister and 1 brother. Oh, we both have a sister. So that could be our back to back. We could jump up, we could high five, we could just laugh about it. So again, it just builds community and really starts to focus on what do we have that's the same? What's the same about us instead of focusing on what's different about us? Then the next one really gets children involved in coming up with solutions to problems. And this strategy is called Race to Write. So what you would do in this strategy is divide your students into small teams, and you would identify what is a problem in your classroom. And this could be a small problem or it could be something larger. But what you're going to do is have students actually have a race, having paper with them and ready to write, and they're going to come up with solutions. So say you have a problem with, I don't know, you don't have a place in your classroom where students can go to calm down. You give the groups of students a chance to race and come up with solutions. So this really identifies a problem in the classroom, but then builds community around how do we solve this problem together. So again, that's called Race to Write, and we just love that they're focusing on solving problems together. Then the final one I want to share is called the 5-minute interview. And interviewing is just such a great technique because it allows one person to ask a question and another one to respond. And how many students with disabilities do we work with that really need to work on that skill of waiting, listening, answering a question? But the best thing is it gives them the opportunity to share about themselves. And so you can have some questions that you want all students to go through, and they could include things like, what's your ideal vacation? Or maybe, what's your favorite book? Or do you have a hobby? Do you have a collection? So again, it not only shares information about each student, but it gives them the chance to talk about themselves in a positive light. And it might even bring up some surprises about what are the interests in the classroom and what things children really do like. So that was a quick overview of 4 more strategies. And again, those were read aloud, back to back, race to write, and the 5-minute interview. So what do you think, Steph? Which one stood out to you?
Those are great ideas, Stacy. And I really like that they involve very little prep. They don't involve extra materials, fancy equipment. I think they're really good ideas to embed into the classroom at the beginning of the year. I personally loved Race to Write. It reminded me of a student I had that was pretty significantly impacted by autism and also had intermittent explosive disorder. And his behavior was when the classwork got really challenging, he would run out of into the hallway, make really loud vocalizations, and interrupt the high school students in classrooms all around us. And it was the idea of one of our peer buddies at the time to give this student a specific spot to go, which was the water fountain. And we worked with the student to learn to go to the water fountain and then turn around. And it really gave him purpose. It gave, a set end goal. So we knew where the student would go. And we knew that once he reached that destination, he would come back. And it was an idea that I never would have had. By that point, I was frustrated with the behavior. I had tried everything that I could think of. And it was really the student that did it. And what was cool is one day we were in the hallway, and this happened pretty frequently. So the student was out getting drinks at the water fountain a lot. And one of the kids in the hallway was like, oh, that kid's really thirsty. He's at the water fountain all the time. And so the hidden benefit of that new idea was just that the stigma was reduced. He was no longer the student screaming in the hallway. He just was a student that looked really thirsty. And so kids have really good ideas, and they're really creative. And sometimes it's really helpful for us teachers to tap into our students for those. So thank you for sharing. For those of you listening, if you like today's ideas, remember to check out the books that we mentioned at the start. The first one was Your Students, My Students, Our Students, Rethinking Equitable and Inclusive Classrooms. The strategies came from 30 Days in the Co-Taught Classroom. And Stacy referenced Preparing Children for Success in School and Life, 20 Ways to Increase Your Child's Brain Power. We're challenging each of you to try one of these this week to strengthen the relationships in your classroom and strengthen the positive climate in your building. Your students will thank you for it. And what's our next challenge to you? Well, in the words of Dr. Costin and Dr. Kluth, remember to sigh, smile, and pat yourself on the back for the lovely classroom community you are building.
And that's it for another episode of 8 with 8. I love these 8 strategies for building a fun and inclusive classroom climate. They're great ways to welcome students back and grow your classroom community, but really, they can be used all year long. For more information on school climate and supports for students with disabilities, or to see the list of questions that I referenced at the beginning, head on over to our podcast page, sst8.org/podcast.aspx. We've linked to the Reset and Restart website on ODE, which has a whole page on additional considerations for special education, including that list of great questions to get your staff thinking and your teachers talking. We've also posted links to the books that Stephanie and Stacy shared, if they're not already on your bookshelf. Join us next week as we continue this conversation and take a look at refreshing our approaches to instruction for students with disabilities, particularly when we anticipate having large skill gaps to fill. Get ready to weed, seed, and feed. See you soon.